BS-Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord. Welcome to BS-Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the usual, bullshit. I'm your host, Trey Dorn. It's March of 2025, and at least I'm recording this. In fact, it's actually Ostara right now when I'm recording this, although not when you're listening to this, most likely, because that's how linear time works. I have to make this for you to be able to listen to it later. And the person that I am right now when you're listening to this is not the same person that I was here now for me when I record this, right? We are constantly moving forward. We are constantly becoming different people. And what we're going to talk about this month is the fact that we are different people. We are echoes of our own past made new into something else. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about reflecting on the person who we used to be versus the person we are now. Because a lot of things, as it relates to witchcraft, all right? Before you think I've gone around the bend, like, as it relates to witchcraft, because we spend a lot of time on witchcraft content. We talk about books, and we talk about, like, our podcasts, and we talk about any kind of witchcraft-related educational media. I don't necessarily, I consider some of my episodes educational, but I consider this to be community media. I think that sometimes we forget there are a lot of people here who have been around for a very long time. And I think some of those people could be you listening right now. And if you're not, if you are new to witchcraft, this is something you should consider. Maybe. I don't know. This is going to be one of those episodes where I'm desperately hoping it makes as much sense to everyone else as it did to me when I thought of it. I'm a Wiccan. We know. If this is your first episode and you're just finding out that I'm a Wiccan, I'm a Wiccan. I am a eclectic solitary practitioner from the 90s. To be more specific. But one of the things, and that at least is very important for most Wiccans, is building your Book of Shadows, right? And one of the things I was always encouraged to do when I started learning stuff was to not just write down the magical stuff I was doing, but to also write about my life circumstances around it, right? Effectively to journal my magical journey. And a lot of people see this as documenting, thinking about, there's a lot of reasons to do this, right? To contemplate who you are, why you're doing things. Sometimes people are just trying to track results of spell. I did spell X. Did it work? Here's what things were like 2 weeks later, when I think the results of that spell I did that one time might have happened. But I think there's another vital thing that it's important to remember. And that is, we aren't always the people we thought we were in memory. We aren't always the story we thought we were. And sometimes it can give us better perspective and understanding of ourselves to revisit those old journal entries. To revisit who we were in those moments as how we thought about ourselves in those moments. Not how we remember thinking about ourselves now, but how we actually did. This is a non-magical example, but recently I've been making modifications to my personal website. For those of you who don't know, traydorn.com is my personal website. It's a version of that website's been online since 1996, and I've got a blog on that site that I've been maintaining since 2001. I have effectively journal entries public to the world going back to when I was 20. I'm 44. Next year that blog's going to be eligible to rent a car. So it's... What happened was that I had to make some modifications to the blog software. Just nerdy stuff, because the blog is so old. I wrote the software that runs my website. And I was revisiting conversations and chat logs and like blog entries from the 24-year-old version of myself, like me in my early 20s. And I was reading these things, and there were some events that I was reading them, and my emotional reaction to certain things was very different than how I remember my emotional reactions being. That there were massive events that I had effectively written myself a story about how I felt about those things in the moment that was not what I actually felt in the moment. Like, there were no factual, like, the events happened the way I remembered them. Like, person A did this thing, person B did this thing, and then I did this thing. Like, those events were roughly how I remembered it. Like, if there was something that I didn't remember in there, it didn't contradict, my recollection of events. So, like, but when I got to the parts about how I felt about things, my feelings about stuff, and some of the stuff was most of this was public, some of it wasn't. I even, like, because I was confused by some of my reactions. I went and dug through some of my correspondence from back then, because I still have a lot of. I'm a data hoarder. I'm a data hoarder, and what I realized is that the person that I thought I was isn't the person that I was. The person that I was significantly more vulnerable than I thought I was. A lot sadder than I remember being. Which I think speaks to just relatively how much happier I am as a middle-aged adult than I was as a person in my 20s. But, like, there are things that I read where I was clearly emotionally devastated and hurt and sad, and I don't remember it. I don't remember it that way because I'm looking at my memories through the lens of the person who I am now. And the person who I am now recalls, oh yeah, person A did that, and the person that I am now is like, oh, huh, that's weird, or that's too bad. Well, the person who I was then was much more vulnerable and insecure about who I was and about certain things. And what I mean to say, to bring this back to the topic of the show, that no matter what we're doing, and be it in our personal lives, be it in witchcraft, be it in both, we are going to be different in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And it is helpful to remember that, to remember the changes that we have made in ourselves and that have happened to us. Now, why is this important to witchcraft? There's a lot of focus on experimentation when people start out in witchcraft, right? There's a lot of like promotion of that in the modern witchcraft movement in our community, that when you're starting out, you should try out a bunch of stuff. Like in Wicca, one of the reasons why we have the year of study is so you can like gain familiarity with a bunch of different things before you commit to a self-dedication or to an initiation and to an initiatory practice, right? And what it's easy to forget is that just because something didn't resonate with us once doesn't mean that 10, 15, 20 years later, it might not actually resonate with you then. And so not everyone is looking to evolve their craft or change their craft. I, for one, am famously set in my ways. I do my magic the way I like my magic, and everybody's happy. And I'm not an expert in a lot of kinds of magic because I found my groove. It's working, and I dig it. But that doesn't mean it's not helpful to go back and remind yourself about how you felt when you did other things in your craft. Like if you are looking to evolve, like if you are feeling like, I know a lot of people have felt like they're in a magical rut, right? It's not an uncommon thing to hear that someone who once really vibed with their magical practice is no longer feeling it, right? That's not a weird thing. It's not an uncommon thing. So what I think is helpful in those moments is to reflect on what you have tried and think about why it didn't vibe for you. And maybe it didn't vibe for you because the person who you were when you tried that 10 years ago, it didn't vibe with. But the person you are now, it might. And by looking at our journals, looking at our notes, looking at who the person we were from the first-hand account of the person that we were. Like if I open up this Book of Shadows that is in my hand here, video viewers can see my lovely, compact Book of Shadows. It's a book. It's a leather-bound book. By looking at my own research and my own notes, I am looking at first-hand testimony of the human being I was. So, this is why I think all witches should journal. I'm sorry. I know that like there's pushback, right? Book of Shadows is a very Wiccan term, right? Because Gerald Gardner literally gave it that name because he thought it sounded cool after like seeing an advertisement in a magazine for something completely unrelated to like anything that he was doing. It was just like you saw the term, and I think it was a palmistry thing. I don't know. Go back and it's in one of the episodes I mentioned it at some point. But whether you call it a journal, a grimoire, like there's obviously focus for a lot of non-Wiccans not to use the term Book of Shadows and have shifted towards like using just straight grimoire, like a tome, which has got their spells, and that's it. But I think, honestly, that a journaling portion, like telling your story as you're doing it, writing that narrative, is helpful for you. It's helpful for you down the road, because, like, it's our memories on who we were, our memories on the person that we used to be are not reliable. They're just not. Like, no matter how certain you think you are that you know who you were 15 years ago, I guarantee you that you don't, because you got here through a long process of evolution and constant change. All of your personal changes were incremental, and you may be dramatically different in ways from the way you were decades ago that you don't even remember. Right? Like, you are not the person you were 5 minutes ago. Just to a much smaller degree than this. But because we have gone through the slow route, we have yet to see the difference in elevation. by having these notes, these journals about details about who we used to be, we gain a better understanding and context for our own memories. Because human memory is malleable and it is often wrong. This is, again, not witchcraft related, but it is a story about memory. I spent years angry at someone for something that they weren't even in the room for. I used to work at this convention. I used to run an anime convention. And I had this vivid memory of this one guy coming up during the closing ceremonies. And he said something atrocious. And I just remember being deeply offended and angry at this person. And I saw I was 100% certain, like, I know who this guy is. Like, it's just one person. It's one dude. I know who he is. And I was mad at him for years and years and years and years for saying something so grossly offensive to us. 8 years later, I found out there's a video of the incident. And I go, oh, interesting. And I watch it. It wasn't him. It was a different guy. It was a completely different mediocre white man. The person I'd been mad at and holding this grudge for years against was not there. My memory had conflated these people. And I was blaming someone who was blameless, but I was so certain. My memory was so certain. If you understand memory, every time you remember something, your brain recalls it and then reconstructs the memory off of that recollection. I could be wrong. I just want to say, I am basing that off of something I heard on an NPR show once. So if I'm wrong about memory working that way, I am not a neuroscientist. But I do know that memory is malleable. I think this is why. I know for a fact, though, that I remembered something that was not true. And sometimes you have to ask yourself how many of your memories about your own life are like that, where you are remembering something that is not true. And normally it's small details and inconsequential. But if you write things down, if you document your journey in life, you have the ability to look back at it with clearer eyes, right? You have the ability to form a better understanding. Self-reflection, I think, is wondrous in our witchcraft. Like, since so many people, like, not everybody is here for personal growth, and I get you. If you're not here for personal growth, cool, man. You do you. I'm not, no shade. But if you are focused on personal growth as a witch, like if that is one of your goals in your witchcraft, if empowering and finding these goals is like, if that's your goal, then look back at the documentation. And if you're living the life now, make the documentation. Write down how you're feeling right now. Write down how current political events are affecting your witchcraft, how the stresses of ordinary life are affecting your witchcraft. Write this down, because there is going to be a point in 15, 20 years when you are stressing out about something, where something else is happening, something major is happening in your life, and you are freaking out, and you want to know how you got through it last time. Write it down so you know how you did it. Because that's the only way to truly give yourself testimony so that you have the evidence in 15, 20 years about who you were in this moment, in this life, as a person, let alone a witch. I know the kind of witch I was 20 years ago. There are articles I wrote that are currently buried but still online about what kind of a witch I was 20 years ago. I wrote them. You can, if you really want, you can go dig them up and find them and read them. They're fine, I guess. But like, I know what kind of witch I was 20 years ago. And it helps me understand the kind of witch I am now. How I got here, why I chose to do certain things, and why I chose not to. And I think that deep down, it's beneficial for us to take stock and reflect on the people that we used to be. And if you're not writing it down, if you're not making notes, if you're not taking stock of who you are now, the person who you will be will have lost the person that you are now. I don't know. I hope that made sense. I've just been really thinking about this lately. I've been kind of accidentally sliding down memory lane in certain ways, sometimes against my will. And I think that understanding the person I was helps me remember the person I've become instead. I'll tell you, sometimes reading some of this stuff, I just want to give 20-something Trey a big-ass hug because I was lost as hell back then. There were people in my life who I deserved better than some of them. And some of them deserved better than me. The only way to make sure that I'm not that person or that I can help people who are in the position that I used to be in is to understand the difference in the person that I am than to know. And somehow this is all witchcraft related, I promise. I don't know. Like, it's all... This is the vibe in my head when I'm like sitting here meditating and doing spell work and shit. It's like, this is the stuff that's floating through my head. This is the stuff that, like, the internal narrative that, like, when I'm seeking clarity, man, I'm just so, like, I don't talk about my own witchcraft so much on this show. I talk about, like, I want to talk about, like, history and, like, issues in the community, which are all, like, well and good. But, like, I know some people say, though, that, like, I don't talk about, like, my actual witchcraft a lot. And while I didn't talk about, like, any rituals or anything like that, I think this is probably, like, some of the most exposed I've been witchcraft related on this podcast. And it doesn't even sound witchcraft related. Awesome. It is. Trust me, it is. It's all in here. I don't know. Before I just completely wander off into the woods then and regret making this episode. I don't regret making this episode. This is a topic that we need to talk about. I think that, like, understanding our own personal journeys is often neglected in a lot of the ways that we talk about witchcraft now. Like, it was really kind of like hammered into me back when I started that, like, you should understand who you are in this moment and who you are becoming. And when you become who you are next, you should be able to look back and understand the person that you were then. And, like, that was, like, an important thing that was drilled into me. And I know that it's not important to everybody, right? Like, I know that there are people that this is not the focus of their craft. But if it is, if you think that could benefit you, I beg of you to consider it. Write shit down about how you feel when you're doing it. Don't just take notes like if you want to take notes about your results, great. And I encourage that. Like, if you want to document things scientifically or figure out why Sec isn't a dragon yet, that's fine. I am all for that, but I also think that it's important that we don't neglect our emotional journeys. And some people may disagree with me on that, and that's cool. I'm not saying this is a general rule for witchcraft, but if you think you would benefit from it, maybe you would, and give it a shot, try it out. And if you have been documenting your journey, but you haven't looked back at it, look back at it. I swear it will give you a better understanding of who you are now if you look at who you used to be and you see the similarities and differences to that person that you used to be. Hopefully that made sense. Anyways, that's what we'll wrap up the topic this month. I want to give a thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. They make this lovely show happen every month. So for just $1 a month, you get access to this show a week early, along with some other perks, like a free copy of my tabletop role-playing game system, Super Awesome Action Heroes. People at the $5 level and above get access to books that I've written a year after they come out. So they now have access to The Witch and the Rose, my contemporary fantasy novel, and the first book in my contemporary fantasy series, The Mia Grave Saga. And contributors at the $10 level get all my books when they come out in ebook form for mass market, which is why they just got access to Shadowcasting, the third book in the Mia Grave series. Just became available to $10 patrons. It's also now available as an ebook for everybody if they want to buy it for $3. Yeah, that's in the Patreon shop. And if you want to support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN. And I want to give a shout out to the people at the $10 level of Lindsay Dosey, Bruce Norville, Courtney, Claire Dennis, and Pamela Staryak. And it's a great way to, and there are also free accounts if you just want to keep up with the updates on the show. But it is a great place to go, to hang out. Also, I understand that not everybody has money. So if you can't go to patreon.com/TRAEGORN, you can alternatively follow me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky at traegorn.bsky.social. I am on Tumblr at traegorn.tumblr.com. And as long as TikTok is operating, I'm still on TikTok at TRAEGORN. I'm on other social media. On Facebook, it's BS Free Witchcraft. No spaces. You can follow the show on YouTube also, because there's the video version. If you're listening to the audio version, there's a video version that you can watch either on YouTube or on Spotify. And on YouTube, it's username BS Free Witchcraft. And also, Traydorn.com. Traydorn.com. I'm attempting to use my own website more often than I used to. I kind of let it get quiet for a while, but I'm back to blogging again. So Traydorn.com or Traygorn.com, or its real URL, trhonline.com. But Traydorn.com is the easy thing to remember, so that's what I tell people. Yeah, you can find my thoughts on a semi-regular basis there, along with links to any social media that are currently active. So consider doing that. This show is a part of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Remember, you can find a bunch of other podcasts at nerdandtie.com, including Brina Guerin's Hex Positive, which is great. You can listen to Casual Trek, a great fortnightly show about Star Trek by two British guys who mainly are fans of things that aren't Star Trek. They like Star Trek, but that's not their thing. And which is the whole point of the show. It's Casual Trek. And also, there are 2 full campaigns of Stormwood and Associates, the actual play show that I'm the meta GM for. like literally like 300 episodes of shows of show that you could go listen to right now of just fun hijinks and excitement. And you can find all that stuff at nerdandtie.com. So nerdandtie.com. Also, if you want to talk to me and hang out and be cool, we have both a Discord for Nerd and Tie at nerdandtie.com/Discord. You'll find an invite. And also the nerdandtie.social forums, which are a forum system. You know, with the potential TikTok ban coming up, I think it's more and more important that we go back to a decentralized internet. Like, the fact that a single platform can take down massive online communities, including a thriving witchcraft community, is dangerous for the future of like online communities, communication, and organizing. And so that's why I've been trying to revive and get my personal website, tradorn.com, running up again fully, and also why nerdandtie.social was launched. So there was a communications platform and a message board that was owned solely by us and not by a major corporation. Because look, Discord's great, and we use Discord, like we have a Discord server, but that's still another centralized company that could be easily banned by a government. But if we make a whole bunch of websites, it's way harder to ban 1 million websites than it is to ban 6. So, think about it. The world is dire. Things are getting pretty fucked up right now. And I want you guys to know that I'm out here. I'm with you. We build community, we find support, and we have each other. And don't forget that. Don't forget that this is a community, and I'm pulling for you. And as I have said for quite a long time on this show, Magicians, dirt in our fingernails, brick in our hands. That's the kind of witchcraft we're doing here. I think that message is more important now than it ever has been. I'll talk to you next month.